Prologue. The Toll. The galaxy is vast, but it is not free. For centuries, humanity looked up at the stars and dreamed of endless frontiers. But when they finally reached out to claim them, they brought their greed with them. The stars were not conquered by explorers or pioneers. They were bought, charted, and fenced in by the megacorporations. They formed the Syndicate, an untouchable conglomerate of wealth and military might that dictates the flow of life across 100 solar systems. They own the orbital shipyards. They own the atmospheric processors on the terraformed worlds. They own the mines that gut the dead rocks on the outer rim. But their true power does not lie in the planets. It lies in the spaces between them. The distances separating the populated systems are too vast for standard light-speed travel. A journey that would take a commercial transport ship 3 lifetimes to complete in conventional space is reduced to a matter of hours by the jump gates. These colossal mechanical rings of spinning durasteel and humming plasma are the arteries of the galaxy, bending the fabric of space-time to connect the furthest reaches of the outer rim to the glittering, wealthy core worlds. The Syndicate built the gates. The Syndicate controls the gates. Every shipment of medical supplies, every bulk transport of raw ore, every passenger liner, and every military cruiser must pass through the rings. And for every ship that passes, the Syndicate collects a toll. They monitor the nav computers. They scan the cargo manifests. They know exactly who is traveling, where they are going, and what they are carrying. To defy the Syndicate is to be cut off from the universe, to be trapped in a single solar system, burning sublight engines until the fuel runs out and the cold void reclaims you. The corporate grip on the galaxy is absolute. It is a perfect, flawless machine of commerce and control, built on the assumption that the Syndicate's technological dominance can never be broken. But out on the fringes of civilized space, on the rusted loading docks and in the dimly lit cantinas of the free trader outposts, there are those who prefer to avoid Syndicate eyes. And out in the dark, there are the spacers who fly the routes the corporations ignore. The independents, the outcasts. A lone cello wept through the cockpit of the Emerald, the rich, mournful notes of a centuries-old sonata pressing back against the absolute silence of the void. Finnick Finn Crow sat slouched in the pilot's chair, a half-smoked cigar clamped between his teeth and a heavy crystal glass of amber whiskey resting on his knee. His boots were propped up on the edge of the central console. He was a tall, hard-angled man in his early 30s. A mess of dark, unkempt hair fell across his forehead, and a heavy shadow of rough stubble coated his jaw. The look of a man who spent far more time sleeping in a pilot's chair than a proper bed. He stared out the reinforced plasteel viewport at the endless, glittering black. Out here on the very ragged edge of the galaxy, the stars looked sharper, colder, and unimaginably distant. Usually, Finn loved that distance. He made his living in the spaces between the civilized worlds. While the massive, lumbering corporate transport ships stuck to the safe, heavily trafficked inner lanes, Finn took the jobs no one else wanted. From encrypted data drives to highly volatile medical supplies, if a colony was too remote, too dangerous, or simply too small to warrant a massive freighter, Finn would take the contract. It was a business model that he and his older brother, Leon, had built from the ground up 10 years ago when they founded their independent courier company, Void Runners. They had started with a single, heavily modified bulk freighter, scraping by on fumes and stubbornness. After 5 years of backbreaking work and moderate success, Finn had finally saved enough credits to buy the ship he'd always wanted. The Emerald. She wasn't a dreadnought, but she was beautiful to him, sleek, heavily modified for speed, and deceptively spacious. From the outside, she maintained a deliberately understated look, a smooth, dark metallic finish that blended into the void, with nothing but the name painted in a deep, vibrant emerald green near the airlock. The inside, however, was a labor of love. A lot of the interior had been put together by Finn by hand, with more than a little help and swearing from his big brother. They had added a few high-end, state-of-the-art parts in the cockpit, sleek digital touchscreens and holographic tactical displays, but Finn rarely used them. He preferred the tactile, analog controls. The heavy, physical clack of buttons and toggle switches just felt more reliable to him than a pane of glowing glass. The crew quarters on the upper deck were a true home to Finn. The living area was laid with thick antique rugs he had picked up from exotic, far-flung parts of the system. He had installed warm, soft lighting, a comfortable lounge area, and built-in bookshelves. But his absolute favorite thing in the entire galaxy sat in the corner by a long, worn leather couch, a vintage, belt-driven record player, flanked by shelves bowing under the weight of a massive collection of vinyl records. But for the last few hours, the Emerald had felt less like a home and more like a tomb. Finn took a slow sip of the whiskey, the burn of the alcohol doing nothing to dull the ache in his chest. He reached out, his calloused fingers brushing against the worn leather of the co-pilot's empty seat. He let out a long, ragged breath, the sound barely audible over the swell of the classical music and the low, steady thrum of the ship's sublight engines. Nearly 2 days ago, he had been standing on the dusty, backwater planet of Wynn, handing over a shipment of water purifiers to a grateful outpost mayor. He had been smiling. He had been calculating his cut of the credits, thinking about what kind of terrible synthetic coffee he was going to buy at the spaceport. Then, the comms panel on his wrist had chimed. A priority transmission from the local authorities on Draven. Finn leaned forward, dropping his boots to the deck, and tapped a sequence into the analog navigation console. The orchestral music dipped slightly as the ship's holographic display flickered to life, painting his tired, unshaven face in a pale blue glow. Hanging in the digital projection before him was Draven, the glittering, heavily populated capital planet of the solar system. It was a hub of politics, extreme wealth, and massive corporate shipyards. Under normal circumstances, Finn avoided it like the plague. He hated the traffic, the regulations, and the suffocating crowds. But today, he didn't have a choice.